It's Keith Townsend from the CTO Advisor. We have a CTO Advisor veteran. You're more than just repeat guest. We've had you a few times on the show, Bobby.
I'm an alum.
You're an alum.
Yes.
So we're gonna have you. We're gonna have you do some hosting today too. I'm surprised you. You didn't know you were.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know you were in for some unpaid work.
No, spontaneous.
Yes.
Thank you.
But CTO CloudGenera.
Yes, sir.
You talk to a lot of customers. You talk to a lot of customers in hybrid cloud, in that motion of going from on-prem, hybrid, multi-cloud. We're at VMworld 2019, which I think is the mecca of hybridity.
Absolutely.
What have the customer conversations been?
The customer conversations, Keith, are interesting because they typically, they want Cadillac analysis, but they want to give you Pinto data. So they've got all sorts of holes in the stuff they're giving you. You know, to use a financial analogy, they want me to do their taxes, but they can't give me a W-2. And I tell them, you don't want consulting, you want magic. That's not possible. And so I say, at least if you can give me a pay stub, I can work with you. But really what we're seeing, Keith, is that people have unrealistic expectations about what they're asking for. They're asking for the wrong thing. So they're asking for tax preparation, but what they need is tax planning. Right? Tax preparation is really about what's happened in the past. Tax planning is about what you might do differently in the future. And so what I'm finding, Keith, is that there's a difference between looking at news and looking at advice. And so the connection between those that we're seeing in enterprise is a lot of people want you to give them advice, but you can't only do that with old information. And the thing that sticks in my mind as I've talked to a lot of CXOs is often good advice starts with bad news. If you are not self-aware about how bad things are, then I can't help you make it better. And the reality is if you can't handle the truth, you can't handle the change. If you can't handle the truth about how bad it is, you can't handle the change about where you need to go.
Yeah, even in my own practice, we have very frank conversations about what we do well and what we don't do so well, so that we can acknowledge it, adjust accordingly, and without that data, you know, you really don't have a going concern.
Right.
So what have you seen specific to kind of the VMware community around this topic of moving from on-prem to hybridity to multi-cloud?
I think the message from VMware has been that we can kind of support you wherever you are, you know, on-prem, off-prem, VMware Cloud on all these other different public cloud providers. And what's interesting, Keith, this is actually one of the things I was looking forward to talking to you about this week. I want to introduce what I'm considering the Popeye's chicken problem of VMware.
Okay.
Because, and let me set it up a little bit. So if you've been living under a rock and you haven't been watching what's been happening in social media, you've got these two juggernauts that are facing off over chicken sandwiches, right? You've got Chick-fil-A, the incumbent, and then you've got Popeyes, who's coming up, who typically was doing something in the fried chicken realm, but they're now transitioning to fried chicken sandwiches. That's the issue that VMware has, because they've been doing infrastructure, they've been managing servers, and the burden is, Keith, are they doing something like Kubernetes, right? Everything at the conference has been around Kubernetes. Is Kubernetes adjacent enough to something that they're expert in, or are they reaching for something that's outside their pocket?
So we only have a few minutes to have this conversation, and it is a big conversation.
Huge.
VMware has bet the bank, so to speak,
Absolutely.
on Kubernetes. The Heptio purchase, the Pivotal purchase, and if we just expand on the Pivotal purchase, VMware cloud services or cloud platform GM, Paul Fazzone wrote a blog post in which he announced the acquisition. 22 references to Kubernetes, one to Pivotal Cloud Foundry. Pivotal is Pivotal Cloud Foundry.
Yes.
Their developers are based on the idea of coming in and helping you learn how to code and build cloud native apps, whether they're containerized or not, on the Cloud Foundry platform. Obviously, VMware is going in a different direction with their acquisition of Pivotal to say that we are going to do development, but we're going to do it on Kubernetes. It's of my opinion that they're going straight after OpenShift and that idea. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I agree with that, Keith. And I think the challenge is, again, it's the perception. They've got the tooling, they've got the chicken sandwich, if you will, but the problem that Popeyes has is the demand, the customer service, and all the other things. You got the chicken, but you're running out of bread. Does VMware have the ecosystem to talk to developers, not just infrastructure people, not just architects? Again, they got a big burden to overcome, and so there's a lot they have to weave together. I was talking to some mutual friends that we know, and I posed this question to them, to these execs. They often say that pioneers take the arrows, but settlers take the land.
Mm-hmm.
And my question to these executives is, with all this new technology VMware's rolling out, how do I know that I'm not going to get shot adopting all this new stuff that you're rolling out?
So the question is it new? I spent some time at VMware, and I will say I don't think it's like any secret that VMware has a challenge talking outside of the infrastructure group. I had that challenge even with my reputation talking outside of the infrastructure group when I adopted the VMware brand. Does buying Pivotal buy them the street cred to have a conversation of depth outside of IT infrastructure? Pivotal is, you go into a lot of Pivotal Cloud Foundry environments, they're not on VMware vSphere, they're on Linux and Linux infrastructure.
I'm glad you asked that, Keith, because one of the things we're seeing is people will say, I'm going to do Pivotal so I'm not locked into Amazon or Azure or Google, but then a lot of other CXOs will say, but I'm locked into Pivotal now.
Exactly.
Right, so it's a different kind of vendor lock-in. I think what VMware is shooting for is they want to be relevant in the conversation when you want to move away from VMware. But let me give you a quick anecdote from a customer conversation I had recently. They were in a data center that they need to exit, and we talked to them about Amazon native and VMC or VMware Cloud on AWS. And this is what the CXO said to me. If I'm going to move the VMs anyway, why would I move it to another VMware platform? If I'm already leaving the data center and the VMware tax, as he put it, why wouldn't I just go native? And so that's a lot of that perception. They've got the products and the tooling, but are people thinking if I've got to change it and touch it anyway, why would I still stick with VMware? It's a level of consistency and a security blanket, but people really want to innovate, and they're thinking about that as moving away from VMware.
So that's a really interesting question. I've had this conversation with Commvault, Veritas, Dell, HPE, all of the traditional infrastructure, and even in some cases application level companies. Microsoft, I think, is a great example. If 5 years ago you said, I want to innovate, so I'm going to leave Microsoft so that I can innovate. Today, that would look like a kind of a foolish decision to say that, I left Microsoft because I wanted to innovate. If VMware and all these other companies are making investments to move their platforms forward, where's the logic in the idea that I have to leave the platform to innovate? Is the platform the problem, or is my culture the problem? Like, am I buying a tool in order to innovate, or do I need to change my culture?
I think you're on it, Keith. I think a lot of it is a cultural change. So I'm going to borrow from something I think Kelsey Hightower said. Kubernetes is really kind of a platform to build platforms. Kubernetes has been aimed more at developers, and I think VMware has been focused more on admins and architects. So it's a paradigm shift to get to the people who are coding to believe that VMware is the foundation for them to have the creativity and the flexibility. I think Amazon really has won more of that battle in terms of the market that VMware has. So VMware has to convince those people that we've got all these other pieces that we're going to be able to integrate to help your, to borrow one of your terms, for things to be more frictionless, right, as you're integrating. But here's what I'll say. One of my colleagues, an architect at an insurance company, he'll often say, is the juice worth the squeeze? And the reality is, if all these things are coming together and VMware's still figuring a lot of this stuff out, do I want to do it the VMware way in terms of containers and Kubernetes and stuff like that? Or do I want to just kind of go towards the AWSs and the Azures that I've already been playing around with? That's the question I think VMware has to answer. And trying to be relevant and look at those things that are above or beyond infrastructure, can you win the hearts and minds of the development teams and the app teams who are really driving a lot more of the business now than central IT?
Seems like the perennial question of the past 6 years. I literally said that 6 years ago, Pat Gelsinger saying that he wants to double down on virtualization, ejecting the Pivotal assets was a pivotal moment for VMware.
Agreed.
Financially, he was obviously right. VMware, over $50 billion market cap, double-digit year-over-year growth every year. So you can't deny the financial results. However, last week, $5 billion in acquisitions because he has to pay the cost of that doubling down on virtualization, that doubling down on that virtualization brand, as you mentioned. Juggernaut success in virtualization, but you can't have the success without the burden of that creates, and now he's buying his way out of it.
Agreed.
So you heard it here first. VMware will likely buy Popeye's chicken for their chicken sandwiches because I guess that doesn't make sense. But if people want to follow you on the web, Bobby, and learn more about your musings, how can they find you in CloudGenera?
So I'm out of Charlotte, which we call Silicon South. So my Twitter handle is actually Ballin in Charlotte, BAllen_CLT, trying to represent the Southeast. That's where we are. Thankful again to be on the CTO Advisor program. Love the value you're adding to the community. Happy to help any way we can.
Thanks a lot, Bobby.
Thank you, Keith.
That's it for this episode of the CTO Dose. Follow us, follow the hashtag CTO Dose, whether you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Twitter. We don't do much Facebook. Not very effective. To join the conversation, talk to you next, CTO Dose.